Hi, my name is Linda Eedes, and I'm a senior member of the ReCM investment team. Today I'm going to talk to you about the case for full flexibility within funds, and in particular discuss the ReCM Global Flexible Fund. At ReCM, we're skeptical about a stringent set of rules that govern how you can or cannot invest in any particular fund. And a good example of this are prescribed minimum limits for any asset class within a particular fund. So a good example of this would be within equity funds, where you have to have at any point in time a minimum of, say, for instance, 80% invested in the market. Now, the reason we don't agree with this comes down to our philosophy, which is one of absolute value. So the twin objectives to our clients are to deliver real returns above inflation and to protect their capital against the risk of permanent capital loss. Now, the reason we focus on these two objectives is as follows. We believe ultimately that investors seek real returns. And the problem with managing to relative returns or versus the market or peers is that it is possible during a period or a market environment where prices are declining, for instance, to beat the market and your peers and not deliver real returns for your investors. And in that instance, we believe that the asset manager isn't fulfilling their promise to their investors. Now, a critical part of that is protecting their capital against the risk of permanent capital loss. This allows compounding off a higher base. Let me give you a good example of this. The investor who starts with 100 Rand, for instance, loses 50% and has 50 Rand, has to then make 100% on that 50 Rand in order to get back to his original 100 Rand. Now, the principle of generating real return and protecting against the risk of permanent capital loss is compromised where you have a prescribed minimum in a particular asset class. And let me give you an example of that. For instance, if the market tends to be overvalued at any one point in time, your objectives require you to invest only where assets are cheap relative to what they are worth in absolute terms, and to stay away from or steer clear from assets which are trading well above what they're worth, where there is risk of permanent capital loss from those prices. Now, when you're forced to invest in a particular asset class because you have a prescribed minimum, you may end up having to buy securities which fall in the latter category and expose your investors to those risks. So there you're really trying to decide what is the least expensive asset rather than investing only where assets are cheap. So absolutely essential to sticking to the absolute value philosophy is to have the full flexibility to invest across asset classes where absolute value presents itself, to defer to cash if those absolute value opportunities are not presenting themselves to the extent that you can fully invest the portfolio, and then lastly, to have a wide opportunity set, which allows you, when any one particular market is expensive, to find value elsewhere. Now, the ReCM Global Flexible Fund is positioned exactly to do that. It's fully flexible, it's a balanced fund, it's able to invest locally and globally across asset classes, and of course from the smaller equities right through to the large caps. Now, this fund seeks to deliver for its investors CPI plus 8, so 8% above inflation. And in fact, over the last 10 years, this fund has delivered 10% above inflation per year. But how it seeks to do this is only ever to invest in those assets which are cheap today. Currently, those opportunities are mostly found overseas. So more than half of the fund is actually invested in US, European, and Japanese equities. And then there are pockets of value in the local equity market as well, but certainly no value to be found in asset classes such as listed property or indeed local bonds. And as a result, we have virtually no exposure to those two asset classes. So having the full flexibility and the wide opportunity set allows us at ReCM to stick to our principles, which are consistent with the absolute value philosophy, and ultimately to do the right thing with our investors' capital.